So, hello and welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. My name is David Owasi, and I am your host. And I'm here with my very good friend and someone who is hugely accomplished, Daniel Tapia. I hope I pronounced your last name properly. But yeah, I'm glad to have him on the show today. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Daniel Tapia. I'm 27, turning 27. I own three businesses: digital marketing company, a nonprofit organization that I started, and a production company I have started as well. And I live here in Los Angeles, California. And yeah, pretty much it.
That's exciting, Daniel. And I'm very excited about chat today because you've been involved in some very interesting entrepreneurship ventures. And we'll chat about some of those things. But my very first question, Daniel, is how did you get started with entrepreneurship? What got you into this in the very first place? How did you find yourself being an entrepreneur? What was that story like?
Well, basically at a very young age, my coming from a low income class family and a single mother, I started into working for myself as soon as I found out that there was a lot of hours converted into a pair of jeans that my mom bought me. And ever since I became aware of, conscious of that thought process, I started working for my own things and started working at a young age and helping out my family at a young age. And that's what pretty much sparked my interest in becoming independent. So I could provide for my family, can help out here and there, save some money, and learn the process of being an adult at an early age.
Yeah, that must have been quite very difficult growing up and having all those responsibilities, whether it was thrust on you or whether you just took them on yourself. What was that like? That must have been very difficult and terrifying in some sense.
In the beginning, I felt like it was a lot easier. Reason why is because I still didn't develop my full consciousness of like being aware of my surroundings. So I had more fun earlier than I did now.
Mm.
So I still had the little kid mentality, having fun, not having so much liability, not seeing it that way, and just enjoying my time as riding my bike. I used to ride bikes a lot, and it didn't. I felt like it was a lot easier. It was tougher, but we never really thought about the tough situations.
Mm.
We only can think of the next step, the process moving forward.
Right. Very interesting because when I think about my own upbringing and background, it sounds very, very similar to you. Of course, I was not born in North America. I was born in Nigeria, West Africa, and same thing, very, very low income family and lots of struggles. And I remember at a very, very young age, I had to start, really taking care of myself, really, and fending for myself to some good extent. I got into university when I was 15, which is a ridiculously young age, but I had to like figure things out there. So how would you say that experience has shaped you into the person you've become? So how did that initial struggles and being thrust into that type of responsibility at a very young age, how would you say that has shaped you as an entrepreneur today?
I'd wish I had taken a little bit more time to myself and set up the actual business. Because I thought throughout this whole process of some of my flaws, some of the things I struggled with. As you notice, I mentioned that we never really thought about the hardships or the things coming at us, the problems coming forward. It created a big flaw now as I live now, because I wasn't used to facing the problem and dealing with it. And it was a prolonged process on just moving forward. I now taking steps back and learning normal human things I was supposed to do. So I learned on how to tackle my problems instead of avoiding it, understanding it, learning from it. So if it happens again, it becomes an option. I want to learn as much as I can, make them as investments. Now, basically, me growing up now, I can understand that is time over money, and therefore my little formula was money versus time. As long as I was working every single hour, I was making money, and I would be happy. Now that I had sustained myself and reached certain goals that I had applied myself since I was the age of 16. So the whole financial bracket for me has always been stable. I never set goals that were too high, too low. So that way, if I don't hit those goals, I don't feel like, like a bad person. I don't belittle myself. So I make sure I make a standard natural growth rate. So that way I don't overwhelm myself. I don't stress myself out. So me being this naturally, I can finally co-adapt and maintain myself financially. I've never had that issue. I always paid bills on time, and you know, I thank myself for doing that at a very young age. But now understanding that concept, I kind of want to rebuild it, add more to it. It doesn't really matter now about how much time out the day I'm working. Is how much less of a time am I at work now versus the same conversion ratio on what I'm making. So that's the biggest challenge. It's the biggest challenge. Reason why is because one, I got to make sure that I enjoy the process that I'm doing. And if I don't enjoy the process, that's where I hold and I take a step back because something's not right. And this analogy of thinking, I didn't have before. I faced a big wall, a concrete wall, in something I'm passionate about. I ended up overstressing it and overusing it that I lost myself in the process. And this is something I love doing with photography, marketing, and stuff like that. I got too busy to the point where I started questioning myself. And second is that, since we are a service company and the quality must always be there, I got to make sure that I figure out ways so I don't, you can't really duplicate yourself. So no one's going to do a better job than yourself. And I'm still understanding that format and creating a company where I can manage over 100 clients plus, instead of me limiting myself 10 clients, per person, and create a healthier conversion rate. Because I just had my son, he's about to be 1, and I want to invest more in time with him, seeing how he grows, because it's self-therapy for me. Because at a very young age, we're just happy for no reason, and we can learn a lot, from babies growing up, and it helps you out cope with when you're working, just to keep the natural process of being happy in what you do. That's pretty much it right now.
Yeah, man, that's just a lot to unpack. Unpacking that answers. I mean, you touched a lot of themes. You talked about your childhood. You talked about fatherhood, and just kind of how that is changing your approach to life. You talked about the balance of time versus money, and just it's funny because at a certain age, money is all that matters. But then as you start to grow a little bit older, you start to realize, well, time is also very crucial, and how do you balance those two things? But before we start diving into some of those things, I just want us to kind of discuss your actual entrepreneurship journey, starting from like a very first business to where you are right now. Can you just kind of share some of the businesses you've been part of, what those experiences has been like? I'm really excited to hear about that.
Okay. Well, I pretty much had a very wild ride. Very young, I wanted to be somebody. I just didn't know what. But I just knew I had a camera with me and I was good at taking photos. Now, it all started when I was taking photos of like celebrities. It was fun working in the process, trying to be involved. I went through some crazy domestic and physical violence with a certain artist that I can't mention his name. And I went to go take pictures of him at an event when I was 17 years old. And I ended up getting hit in my stomach, went to the restroom, started crying. And a guy had approached me and had asked me if I was right. Told him everything. Turns out that this guy was the CEO of the company at the party we were at. He offered me a vesting contract to become a partner and shareholder into the company if I used the skills that I was providing for the artist to him. We were on this journey together, building up this app. And throughout the process of this app, I was 18 years old at that time now. And we witnessed a lot of people growing, a lot of companies, startups, and I've never seen anything in my life like that. We were there with Core Water, when WeMap started their app platform, a bunch of companies. And I was still lost in the process. And at that time, when I hit 20, I was part of a company a long time ago that I helped build up, and it's called WhatsApp. And I was the youngest shareholder in that company. And I got bought out and sold my stock units at that age at 20. So I never really had any money like this. It was a big check that was given to me. Went to their attorney's office, picked it up, put it on my pillow, and then I woke up just to make sure it was still there. And it was still there. So I made sure I wasn't dreaming. And it was those moments where I thought this would change my life, but it honestly caused more problems than what it has. Because you give money, you give that amount of money to someone that's never had it, they're gonna go crazy. And there's a lot of psychological work that you have to humble yourself before you attain money like this, especially like that. So it was about like 4.9 million. And first thing I did, bought a car.
That's awesome.
And I got bored of things quickly. And I never really mentioned to my family, my mother, but I took care of her. Never mentioned that I attained some sort of wealth. For some odd reason, started becoming very scared of everybody, and felt alone. We rented out mansions, became good friends with Elvis Presley's daughter, Maria Presley, and we stayed in her home. It was like 9 bedrooms, 11 baths, and I never felt so alone. And I've always enjoyed keeping company. And throughout the process, I wanted to keep myself busy, so I'm not at home in that big home without doing anything. So I started working with a guy that manages a bunch of car dealerships. Was with him for a year, and I've always loved cars, and it kind of interests me to start my own company. After some battles of signing a non-compete contract, going to some crazy lawyers here, and getting money stolen from me on trying to fix these problems, I ended up getting into more problems. It was very discouraging for me because I can just see money just tumble down so quickly, faster than what I got it. And I had crazy expenses. So those crazy overhead expenses always stayed the same, regardless of how much money was being burnt. I had about, as an individual, $39,000 a month in just expenses. And that's a lot of money. What ended up happening is, as I was growing this company, it's what saved me now. I started it, I managed a couple of my own dealerships. I got to the point where I was managing over 150 dealers and had about 33 employees. It was a good run. It was definitely a good run. Money burned out quickly. 2 years after that, I had the IRS knocking on my door. I didn't know taxes needed to be paid on this amount of money. Like I said, I came from a low income. We barely know how to do our taxes at work. And it took a big hit. And I just finished paying off a certain balance just not that long ago. And they took everything. They seized a couple of my cars. They seized my bank account when I was in Ohio, so I couldn't even fly back and purchase a flight ticket or anything like that. So it was a very crazy, depressing experience. But I'm glad I went through it as I was young, and I kept going at it in my business. I remember working, not sleeping, all 4 days out the week, and just hustled it. I knew I was young, so I knew I needed to take advantage of that energy I have at that time, because it's not going to be the same as we get older. I had no kids, I had no priority, I had no relationship, so I just took full advantage of the situation. I ended up hitting a nasty wall in the business. No matter how much money was coming in, for some odd reason, something was not clicking. And for me to understand and sit down in my chair to start writing a couple of things on how I started it, it's so tough because no one's going to have the right answers for you. I was so discouraged on losing a lot of money with lawyers and stuff like that. I couldn't trust anyone. I couldn't even trust myself at times. So I had to write these thoughts on my head. I wrote everything down. I started adjusting myself in my company based off the notes I wrote. And because I kept getting a lot of feedback on me not being a good owner, me talking disrespectfully, me being rude. And I didn't want to mix that with people that are actually just telling me this just because they don't want to work. So I needed to distinguish whether it was a me problem or it's just a human problem. And yes, it was a me problem. So I decided to correct these issues. And now that I stand corrected and speaking properly and learning how to stay organized in the company sense, whenever I feel like there's a certain problem, I know it's not coming from me. And if it is coming from me, I always advise my partners, employees to correct me. I enjoy being corrected. I didn't finish high school, so I owe myself the responsibility of learning as I grow.
Mm.
And self-correction is the best correction for me. So when I get corrected, I enjoy the process of growth. So after I ran all those dealerships, I lost my main partner. He just decided to go on a different venture. I overworked him. I can admit that I overworked him. He barely had time for his family in the holidays. I failed to acknowledge the process of growing my company, because when I was making that amount of money, I was just paying people to handle things.
Mm.
So I wasn't part of the actual process. So now that almost not really to square one, but I'm being challenged with these tasks of growing the company that I should have paid attention a long time ago. And I can only beat myself up for it. By the time I hit 21, I sold a couple of the stores I had. I was running a Metro BCS store, T-Mobile store, Boost Mobile store. And it wasn't a environment for me. I kind of got tired of dealing with people on a daily basis. And I had to move on from that. So I went full on this digital marketing company. And throughout the process, I wanted to fill a void I had because I was working so hard. I wanted to make sure I had a purpose here, even though I couldn't have determined what the purpose was.
Mm.
I started donating some money to a nonprofit organization I started.
Mm.
At first, I was being a little dummy, handing checks, paying people's tuition, and I noticed that it's caused more problems because I was not in control on how they can spend it. Sometimes they can spend other things, blah, blah, blah. One thing I did notice is when you help somebody get a job, they work for their money.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve that money, and they respect it a lot more because they worked for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hired an agent, help college students find jobs. It was a lot cheaper for me, and it made more of a bigger impact.
Mm.
I helped about, I would say 17 students. It's not a lot, but it's a process. It's a process, and the fact that I was able to do with such little money and make more impact in people's lives is what, made me more happier.
Mm.
Now that I'm understanding this whole time relevation with my company, I got to figure out on building more software, making things a lot more easier, and so to free up that time gap, because I feel like this is something we need in our company in a digital marketing space, because software and technology is coming out, is replacing people, so it's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta always readjust every year in my company to what the current technology services people are providing versus our competitors. Reason why I got so far as well is that I became best friends with all three competitors in my space. I was desperate for answers. I was calling. I had 4 dealerships. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I called a company that had over 3,000 dealerships. And the owner was nice enough to call me, coach me, and he still speaks with me to this day. And we built software together. We helped each other out, and we have each other's back. Not once did they want anything from me, nor did I expect anything from them. And that's the reason why the relationship is so well, because we don't want anything from each other. And that's where I currently stand right now.
Man, wow, what a story, man. I mean, I guess that at some point maybe your life will be shot in a movie with all the amount of experiences and things you've encountered. But one of the things I want to ask you about is this. So one of the themes that I've picked up, you found some very early success, very early in your life. Like a lot of people wouldn't see, a couple $1 million, not until they're in their, late 30s, 40s, 50s, and stuff like that. So for people who are young, right? who are chasing money, who for them money is everything, and they can't really see anything different from money. What would be your advice be to someone like that whose motivation is primarily money? And by the way, money is very crucial and important. But what I'm hearing from you is you're saying that money cannot be the be and end all of everything. Your motivation has to be rooted in something, and money just happens to be the byproduct of you getting to that motivation. Well, can you just share, your advice for someone who is motivated by money, and based on your experience, why that should not be the primary motivator? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Um, well, basically, at a very young age, experience it. Experience what you want to experience. So your curiosity doesn't end up killing you later. But
Mm,
as long as that we're aware that money isn't everything, and time over money any day, you can understand the analogy on how to grow and when you're experiencing and how to limit yourself. Now, if your motive is money, you know, creating creating a daily target goal every day and then adjusting it every month with a slight increase, it's gonna slow growth is gonna be the best growth throughout a certain time frame.
mm,
Now, I started slowly as well from a young age, $50 a day. Then next month was $100 a day. Next month after that was 120 a day, and I started adjusting myself to it. Now I naturally build a. It's like it's like a how do I say a formula to grow, a slow growth.
mm,
And I know there's a bunch of young entrepreneurs out there that the diversion is just money, money, money. You know, if you want healthy money to come to you at a sustainability where you're not killing yourself, you're not putting yourself at risk, your company at risk with lawsuits or anything, make sure you have a passion for it. Reason why I say passion, so when things do get dark, the passion is the only thing going to be carrying you out of
mm,
your darkness. Second is your quality. If you make sure your quality or whatever you're providing is consistent and it's what people need in the market, money will come more consistently than you would expect. And also is, branding yourself, marketing yourself, and make sure, you stay, you, you, I'm not really smart enough to say on how to compete with other businesses, but I'm smart enough to stand myself out
mm,
so no one can compare. So right now, since every market is saturated, no matter
mm,
regardless of what everyone says, just stand out. Just stand out. Make yourself as weird as possible. Make yourself different. And the marketing and the way your company will grow, you want to need to compete against other people because you will
mm,
naturally just get there at a certain pace. Other than that is self-control over the money. Most importantly, it doesn't make sense making $10,000 to $20,000 a month where you can't keep most of it.
mm,
So money on basically making a lot of money, you got to make sure you stay with it most of the time. And since a lot of younger people have more energy than we do right now, take advantage of how much money you can save. It can save you in the future. Other than that, differentiate what you need and what you want in your business, and treat your business as a separate identity as yours. It's what your company needs, not what you need. It's what your
right.
company needs to provide. Create a rubric. I think it's a daily discipline at
Mm,
a very young age. Reason why you can access a lot of money is the energy, being consistent, waking up early, doing research on your market, and I would just say listening to advice from your elders because they come and play. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all the advice I have.
Man, you got so much of this advice, man. Thanks for sharing all that. So again, all your answers are so packed with so much stuff to unpack. And some of the things I'm hearing from you is you're saying that number one, you need to understand, you need to follow your passion. So money is not the be and an end all. And if things go bad, then you can always fall back to your passion. I also, hear some of the things you talked about, when it comes to marketing. You talked about branding, you talked about differentiating yourself. And actually, when I work with my clients, as a business coach, I always explain that in something called a market dominating position, which is basically a unique selling proposition that makes you different from everyone else who does the same thing. Because you're right, every market is saturated. And a good example of that market dominating position is, say, for example, you're a realtor, and a dominating position will be something like, well, I will sell your house in 30 days, otherwise I will sell it for you for free. Because everyone sells houses, that's the obvious thing, but this is what experience you get when you come to me. And I think that is very crucial for entrepreneurs as well. And I really like your answer on self-control and looking to get advice. I think one of the themes that has come up and up again in our conversation is, I've really observed, Daniel, just your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to almost not take yourself too seriously, and your ability to be able to accept feedback and almost kind of like see yourself from a thought perspective. It's like, I'm just going to look at myself and my action and the feedback. Who is at fault? Yeah. And if I'm the one at fault, I'm ready to take responsibility, and I'm ready to take the advice and the action that I need to fix that. For an entrepreneur to be successful, what is the place of those key things? Being vulnerable and making sure that you're not taking yourself way more seriously than you should be, and also listening to advice, and not only listening to advice, but being open to the fact that you don't know it all, that you can make mistakes, and that is fine. It doesn't define who you are, but making mistakes is always an opportunity to grow and improve yourself. Why should an entrepreneur consider those things to be important if they want to be successful?
Well, you can't build a business if you're not willing to build yourself. So while your company is under construction, so are you. You know, there's universe advice that someone can give you, and having your ears open is the best thing possible for you, yourself, and the company. Again, the company that you're building has a different identity, so you need to become a better provider for your company, a better tool, a better infrastructure. I feel like they're all key things that we have to do, because at the end of the day, consistency, passion, and discipline is the key players on becoming successful. I wouldn't consider being successful as of yet, but from all my flaws and all the mistakes I made, I can see where I needed to make improvements on. That's why we got to learn how to embrace our failures, embrace when we make a bad decision. You know, we can learn a lot from them. We can definitely learn a lot from them. One thing is for sure is like advice is very hard sometimes to listen to because it's unrelatable most of the time.
Mhm.
But when you hear somebody else's failures now, and now you know what to avoid,
Mm,
instead of like trying to feel like you want to know it all. You can see what you can avoid.
mm,
So if something comes up, you can hit your brakes right on the spot and you can avoid that problem. And sometimes we are those people that we have to run in these problems in order for us to understand.
mm,
Even knowing that it's probably not going to go well, we're human. And sometimes we make these mistakes purposely to help us grow, which is unhealthy, by the way.
mm,
It's very, very unhealthy because there's no reason on building out a plan.
mm.
You build out a plan and something that you know is not part of the plan and you still decide to go to it, it's not part of the process. Is inconsistency is key to everything. You gotta keep these same thought habits every single day.
Right.
Uh, every single day. Eventually, you're gonna end up building what you want, but you gotta make sure you build yourself in the process of building your company.
Absolutely. There's always a quote I like, consistency is the hallmark of champions. I mean, literally anyone can do any amazing feat one day. Doing it over and over and over and over again is really where, it really becomes you being a master of that same thing. Now, there's something you've been referencing in our conversation, Dan, that I want to kind of touch on is the idea of embracing failure, right? And in this culture that we find ourselves in, embracing failure is seen as, well, failure is seen as something negative, right?
Yeah.
And we always talk about, our generation, I guess we'll call ourselves, millennials, where, everyone wants to have a participation trophy. Everyone wants to feel like they did well, and no one wants to feel like, they failed or they were unsuccessful. For an entrepreneur to be successful, what is the place of being open to embracing failure and just seeing your failure not as a reflection of your self-worth, but seeing failure as just another avenue for growth? Can you tell me a little bit more about that, changing that perspective and being open to experiencing failure and not seeing that as the end of you, or seeing that
Yeah.
as your value or your worth? And how does that lead you to become the better version of yourself if you have that approach towards failure? Share more about that with me.
Yeah. So after experiencing a lot of failures myself and a lot of darkness myself, I had a good perspective of thinking. And I remember I picked up a random book at Barnes and Noble, and perspectives of thinking of your current situation. It's a core beauty of what what life is about. There's nothing normal, does not exist. A normal way of thinking does not exist. I don't understand to this day on why we see failure or darkness as a bad thing. If the common human analogy is that we learn and we grow from pain, why aren't we embracing it? Why are we only embracing when we do certain things well? Now, having that perspective of thinking, you can understand on how much you can grow when you make a mistake, on how much potential you have. When people are uncomfortable, it's for a reason, because it's something they're not used to. It's something that they never experienced, or it's just something that just doesn't match to what they're trying to do, because it's something different. Understanding these perspectives of thinking, for every good there's bad, for every bad there's good, and having a third point of view perspective on what's good for my situation, because sometimes our consciousness can mislead us just on how we were raised, how society has raised us to be. It's always good to have a non-conscious mind that thinks from a third perspective, just to catch you in your place and make sure you're okay. Because there's some certain situations where you're like, oh, I feel this in my gut, but you still decide to do it, or you still decide not to do it. The gut feeling is the consciousness of you telling you what decision to make. And having this perspective of thinking of understanding from our failures, the darkness we go through is where we learn the most. And I wouldn't say to enjoy being in a dark place at all times, but we should not see this as a failure or as a setback in our career or in the human life form. It doesn't make sense to think in that analogy. Canelo, the boxer, the reason why he became so strong and skilled is because of all the hits he absorbed. So he understood on how to deal with the pain. He understood on how to dodge and weave and when to take his hits. Sometimes you gotta take like 6 steps back to get more steps forward. Sometimes we don't take those steps forward at that point of time, and it's okay. It's okay to take a step back to understand, because that can possibly save you from a darkness that you can sustain yourself with. And one thing is for sure, and I wish I could have told myself, is be easy on your the way you see these mistakes. Can't be so hard on yourself. And sometimes every battle isn't meant to be won. Sometimes we have to sit and just deal on how we're feeling, so that way we can use it as an investment to not make the same mistake over again. And having a perspective of thinking of self-control of what things that happen that is out of your control. That's true. We really can't plan and see the future on what's going to happen. But the beautiful thing is, the thought process and perspective way of thinking is, you're always going to be in control on how you take things, full control. And that's the most underrated superpower that every human has. So when something does happen, you can reflect, understand it, and deal with it. And you can move on, and you grow. You learn how to tackle problems a lot easier and a lot fluently when you have different perspective ways of thinking. Why am I in this situation? How did I put myself in this situation? Will I grow from it? And how do I feel about this? Is it worth it for me or not? Is it worth it for the company? It's basically it.
Yeah, those are fascinating answers there, Daniel. Again, so much to unpack in your answers. I consider myself a student of Stoicism, which is a philosophy about how you handle obstacles that come in your way, and the idea is to be able to almost like distance yourself from whatever is happening, and it's neither good, it's neither bad, it's just what is, and how you define what is what makes it that, right? If you see your mistakes as the end of the world, then the worst thing that could ever happen, then that is how it will feel, as the worst thing that's ever happened. And if you see your mistakes as well, and that misstep in to teach me lessons, or to for me to grow and take that one step back so I can move 3 steps forward, then that's what it is. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. Our mistakes do not define us. Our mistakes are just one extra thing. They're just a thing, not positive or negative. It's just what it is. How you handle and look at it is what really defines how it becomes, how big or how small it becomes in the grand scheme of things. When I think personally about myself, tons of mistakes I've made, like for my first business, how I handled customer issues, to how I handle my finances, to how lots and lots of mistakes. But of course, all of those have shaped me to be who I am today. So then I want us to take a little bit of a pivot in our conversation here. I want us to talk more about fatherhood and being a parent, and how that has impacted your life both personally and as an entrepreneur. How would you say being a dad has changed your life? Because I'm a new dad as well. You and I are both new dads, and that has had a tremendous impact in our lives. What would you say that has looked like for you?
It's changed the way I see things, and it's the reason why I have perspective of thinking. I didn't wait the perspective of thinking on my own fully. So as soon as I never expected for both worlds to collide.
Mm,
And now he's part of my world, my son's part of my world, and my business has always been part of mine. I had to learn how to separate the both.
mm,
It's still a learning process right now. Like I said, there's no perfect father out there. Especially because I'm young. Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough,
mm,
and sometimes I feel like I'm behind. And understanding this process is so different for me, and I can't give full advice like how I would in a business perspective, but it's a learning experience for me. And one thing is for sure is that seeing him happy makes me want to be as happy as him, and it makes me want to work now. So when he gets older, all he has to do is be happy.
mm,
All the curses in my generation that has been passed down, I'm not going to pass it to my son, nor does he deserve to be part of any of those crises of even the way my thought process is as a father to him. He needs to grow and adapt in his own environment, which he chooses to. I'll support 100%.
mm,
Now, my girlfriend has been a stay-at-home mom as well. She started her business, and it's definitely caused a bit of problems, conflict, because I, as a father, thought that she was privileged to be at home, be a stay-at-home mom, and not work and not going through that stress. But I failed to acknowledge my own family's issues as well, because sometimes we feel like just because we're comfortable in this space, some other people can't. They're not comfortable in theirs.
mm,
There's stress environment as a father, as a mother, and I have to understand. And I would say it's just a lot of communication as a father right now. A lot of communication, just because everything is going to be extremely different.
mm,
And is as a father is helping me become bigger as a person
mm,
with more time for my son. And is definitely changed me a lot, because it's the whole dad feeling is hitting me late now. It's hitting me all at once now. I want to spend more time with him. I want to be with him. I'm no longer on my phone or taking any business calls, emails, or anything when I'm around him. So he has my 100% attention. We have not experienced this generation growing up, his generation growing up, and our parents are looking down on our phones. We don't know what that's going to turn on the next 15 years.
mm,
I'm already scared of Gen Z. I'm not trying to be scared of the Gen Z after that. And he doesn't deserve that. He deserves my full attention when I'm there.
mm,
Uh, I know this is a good feeling. I know it's the right feeling. There's nothing bad about that. So I'm just gonna lean on that and just follow it and see where it takes me.
Absolutely. It's one of those things I struggle with myself, being able to be fully present. And, in some of the coaching calls we've been part of together, and one of the advice we've always been getting is you don't have to literally spend, a significant amount of time with family if, there's work to be done, especially if you're in the growing phase and you're building the business, right? But whenever time you spend with the family, you have to be all in, no distractions. And I, truly respect the fact that you've been able to do that. For me, that's an area of struggle, but thanks for sharing your thoughts and experience when it comes to fatherhood. For myself, fatherhood has been amazing. I mean, I guess being a father in a pandemic must have been a very unique experience as well. But how did that actually change? How did that affect your experience of being a father, being in the pandemic? Did that make any difference? I'm guessing you don't know it is to be a father outside of a pandemic, but how would you say being a dad in the pandemic has
It,
affected?
it honestly brought out the fighters in us, and I was
Mm,
able to see that. And I'm glad that actually happened
mm,
because having a kid in this pandemic is like one of the craziest things I've ever got to see. It definitely put me at full defense and full attack mode at the same time.
mm,
A crazy experience for me because my wife couldn't go out when my girlfriend couldn't go out when she was pregnant, and anybody that came in contact with her, I had to keep my guard up.
mm,
And we fought. We depended on our company for the income, and that was
mm,
our biggest mistake because when
mm,
that income came to a pause, we questioned everything. And we don't depend on anything, on anyone, or one source of income. And I'm glad that the pandemic and being a father now put me in my place, put me in my position, and caught everybody off guard.
mm,
Everybody off guard. And me and my girlfriend worked while she was pregnant. We were doing shift, and we were making the same amount of income, replacing the income every month. We worked hard while she was pregnant,
mm.
and we experienced it. We were super careful, and this pandemic honestly taught me on how to fight for my family at a very early start,
Mm.
very very early start. Because I usually feel like fatherhood, the fighting spirit comes along with the process, but it's something that was corrected and put in my place at the very beginning. I'm glad it happened. I'm
Mm.
actually very glad it happened.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely identify with that as well because, prior to the pandemic, I had this like very nice, corporate job, making good money. I was, working in a nice office, high-rise building. It was fun. It was good. But I knew, inside me, I wanted to go, start my second company. I mean, I tried starting a second company at that time, sort of part-time. It didn't work out. So I knew I had to launch a third company. But then as the pandemic hit, I lost that role, right? I lost that job. And then I was, in this position where my wife was on mat leave. We had this little small baby. There was this pandemic, and there is no way to bring in, consistent income. And that was like a big, jolt to my system. It's like, okay, you gotta be, the father, you gotta provide for your family. And man, was that a good challenge? It was a good opportunity for me to like dig into myself, realize all the things that I can do and how I can shoulder all of this. And now, my company is flourishing now, things are going well. I mean, I am not going back to corporate anymore. Things are really going good. So it's been difficult, but it's been a blessing in disguise, which I'm very, very grateful for. Now, 46 minutes have gone by so quickly, Daniel, but I want us to do a little bit of a last pivot in our conversation. One of the things that you've brought up over and over and over in our conversation that I've observed is emotional intelligence, right? And when I look at emotional intelligence, I consider three areas and three aspects to emotional intelligence. There's the self-awareness, understanding what's going on inside of you to be able to know where you need to make changes and where you need to fix things, right? And I see that a lot in you. You have that awareness, being able to almost like come out of yourself and just kind of see everything from a bird's eye view, sort of, seeing the forest from the trees. And I think that's something you've been able to do to experience the growth. And I also see a lot of, self regulation or self control, right? So you have all of these feelings, how do you put them under control to accomplish your goal? And then I see a little bit more of empathy as well. How do you treat yourself well? How do you have compassion for yourself and also for others? Can you share a little bit more about your experience and your journey through emotional intelligence? If you thought about it that way from emotional intelligence, or if you were thinking it from a different perspective, but how has that journey looked like for you? Just being aware of your emotions, controlling things, and just having that empathy for yourself and others. What does that look like for you?
Well, I noticed I started becoming more aware when a lot of bad things kept happening. Nothing, absolutely nothing went as planned. And I needed to protect myself and save myself from mental illness, and started becoming more aware of why I'm in this problem. If I'm always having this problem, maybe I'm the problem. So as soon as I started figuring out that was the problem, I became more emotionally aware of my actions, who I surround myself with, what type of energy do I give out, and the energy I receive back. And it's definitely has saved me from a lot of future mistakes, future problems. Reason why is I can now understand where I stand in the wrong, when something's not working out, when to take a step back, and when to understand and when not to understand. And the beauty of it is, we can be aware of the things around us and take the decision and control we need to take. But definitely I became more aware through my mistakes, because I had a breaking point of a barrier in my brain that I had to realize that, something needs to change. And in reality, boggles my mind that it's just nothing but what's that called? Common sense. Common sense. Are we really emotional intelligent, or it's just the common sense that we lack? And we all have different type of common sense, but I feel like we do need to become more emotionally independent and aware of the things going on now. It can save you from a lot of pain, wasted time, more mistakes, just by acknowledging your present you.
Completely agree with you. And there's a concept that it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm not sure if you've heard of that term before, but basically the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically when it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you're not aware of what's going on inside you, you're completely oblivious that you are behind the pain, the suffering, the failures that you've experienced. And if you're not aware that it's coming from you, you start to blame others, right? And then you start to look at external factors to blame, and then that just spirals into a crazy dark place. And that's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect in the way where it's used in different contexts, but it's the idea of if you don't know what you don't know, then you're fighting a losing battle. But if you're able to understand that, okay, I am the problem, which is kind of what you just explained here. You talked about the fact that, well, I am the source of this. If there's a pattern happening and it always seems to end with me being in the middle of this pattern, then it's probably my fault. Okay, then not judging yourself for that, which is very crucial too. It's like, okay, this is what it is. Then it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of self-love, even to be able to take that pain and say, I am the result. I am the cause of my pain, and then find ways to deal with that. What are your thoughts about that? Oh man, it's been a busy day. Just a lot of sneezing here.
One thing that I did leave out, and I feel like is a key player too, just emotional, independence, is we can't make decisions based on our emotions. We cannot. If we have too much emotion, well, we shouldn't even be putting both together. But if there's too much emotion on making a decision, it's maybe for a reason. And because when something goes wrong, making a mistake, and we made it based off emotions, we're just gonna go crazy. It's gonna go crazy. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I emotions by themselves, they're just what it is, right? It's not bad, it's not good, it's just what it is. The question is, how do we handle those emotions? When do we choose to act on them? When do we choose to not act on them? And that is where the nuances of someone who is emotionally intelligent, is different from someone who is completely oblivious and just kind of lives their life on default. So whatever their feelings are, they just kind of act on it without thinking, okay, is this feeling consistent with how I want things to play out? Is this feeling going to get me to my goal? Do I need to do some other things? And just do that thought process is really the difference between someone who is just giving into their feelings all the time and those emotions as they come, and someone who really takes the time to really think, does this feeling help me reach my goal? Is this feeling going to hurt people around me? And thinking about that is almost a process in itself. But Daniel, we've had a fantastic conversation today. I mean, your life, man, at this space, you're going to have a movie done of you at this space with all these experiences. But I do appreciate the humility you have. I do appreciate the willingness to really dig into yourself and to not take yourself too seriously, because I think that's a very, very important trait. Once we don't take ourselves too seriously, it helps us to be humble, to realize our mistakes, and to realize that we're not bigger than making mistakes, and we are always able to learn and grow from them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it doesn't make us any less or any worse. And once we don't attach our ego, and once we don't attach our self-worth to our mistakes, which is kind of what I've just learned from our conversation, it means that we can grow, we can become better versions of ourselves. Before I let you go, Danielle, any last words of insight, advice, or wisdom you'd like to share to our listeners?
Um, yeah, I was gonna actually ask you a question,
Okay.
and understand just the conception of it. How did you become aware, emotionally intelligent with yourself?
That's a very good question. So for myself, awareness started from I started to understand at a very young age. Like, I'm a very passionate person, right? Like, once I'm passionate about something, whether it's positive or negative, like, I go from 0 to 100 very quickly. So if I'm furious and mad in a situation, I get really mad. If I'm loving something, I go all in. And for me, it was just like, I was very curious to understand what's all of this about. Like, why am I this way? Because other people were not like that. Like, a lot of people I hang around with, very like monotone in a way, and like a little spikes here and there. But for me, I'm like zero up, zero down, and just that way. So I really wanted to understand why I was that way. And the reason was that if I wanted to be a high performer, I needed to be able to control myself. I needed to be able to know what was going on and always be in control. And that led me to a lot of reading. So I read a lot of Daniel Goleman's work about emotional intelligence, and I just kept reading more and more materials. I even know back then it was called emotional intelligence, right? Until I started to read about researchers, then I figured, okay, that is what it is. And from knowledge comes wisdom, right? So knowledge is no knowledge by itself, it doesn't do anything, it's just knowledge. But knowledge applied, in a nuanced way, is then wisdom. And for me, that was kind of how I started to really understand, okay, this is what I'm feeling, okay. And then I started to really understand all of those things. And then beyond that, lots of journaling, right? So for me, and I think that's something you and I both have in common, when I go through an experience, I will journal about them. And that journaling helps me to almost, I have almost like two me's writing or talking to each other, right? And those two me's are like equal. They're like, right and wrong me in a way. And, the right me says something and I write it down. The wrong me says something, I write it down, and I compare what's going on between both of this part of me. And I try to balance it. And then the mere act of writing and documenting things shape the way I think about things, because in real life, when I have situations where emotions are starting to become tense, I just default back to as if I'm journaling and writing about it, and then I'm able to like talk to myself and like almost self-regulate. Okay, David, you're mad right now. Being mad is not a problem, but do we need to be mad right now? Do we need to act on that? Emotions right now? Can we keep it under control? And I almost like counsel and talk to myself, because I've practiced doing that by journaling and writing about it. And another thing that the journaling has also helped me do is that, over time, I will go back to my old writings and I will kind of see how I handled various situations. If I'm feeling the same kind of feeling, if I'm feeling fear, because for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was very afraid. Like, shoot, is my family going to be kicked to the curb? I mean, are we going to survive this? We just have a little baby. How am I going to survive? But then I went back to like some of my writings from when I just started my very first business. I was very afraid back then too. And I saw how I wrote about my fear. And then I saw how I progressed when I used that fear to drive my business and the positive impacts it happened to, in my business back then. So I was able to just go back, tap into that, use it in my current, present state, and that really worked well for me. So a little bit of a jumbled answer, but a little bit of knowledge and reading, because that is very crucial. You don't know what you don't know, so you have to go out there and look for knowledge to help supplement what you know already, to make sure you're operating with the right information. And then once I have all of that knowledge, I practice and apply them in my real life in a nuanced way. So I kind of take the knowledge, apply it, seal the results, and then go back on and on and on until I really perfected how I work, because everybody works very differently. You have
Yeah.
to understand how you work, but you need the knowledge to help you understand what you're working with, the parameters, and then you then have to then fine tune yourself based on the knowledge of those parameters, and then that helps to become a better version of yourself. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. And would you agree, now we're becoming more emotionally aware, would you agree to the younger people watching this video that they don't need to go through these hardships and these problems we went through for them to become successful?
True. The smartest people learn from other people's mistakes. And if you rely on learning from your own mistake, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just terribly inefficient.
Yeah,
Because by default, we will all make mistakes. And I think you mentioned this earlier. If you can avoid the mistakes that someone else have made by learning from them, that jumps you ahead of the curve, right? And yes, you don't have to go through all the pain and suffering and go through exact same thing to get to where you need to be. And again, one of the ways to avoid those mistakes is by learning, reading, listening to mentors, people who've gone through that path ahead of you, and listening to what they've said. For me, I'm a huge believer in being mentored. Like, I have lots of people who mentor me. I listen to people's different perspectives, and I always crave knowledge, because knowledge is what helps you learn from other people's journey, so you don't make that same mistake, and that you can get to your goal faster and more efficiently. But yes, I definitely agree. You don't have to go through all the mistakes in the world to be successful.
yeah. I want to throw that analogy out the window. That shouldn't exist right now. Where people say, you know what, he needs to learn. He needs to go out and make mistakes and fail. No, we can't say that. We are in no role and position in life to say that about somebody else's goal. Can't push them in the hole that you would want to push them and let them fall into their own hole. And we can't encourage other people just by letting them suffer in order for them to learn. No one needs to suffer.
No, they don't.
Mentorship and understanding other people's experiences can help you avoid these problems.
Although that being said, regardless of how hard we try, we are always going to make mistakes. The question is, how many mistakes and how costly are these mistakes going to be?
Exactly.
And if you don't have to make a mistake, then don't make the mistake by learning from other people who've done it ahead of you, because you will still make some mistakes, but you want to reduce the many mistakes you will make, and you want to reduce the severity of the mistakes you make. I mean, someone who makes a mistake, someone who, there are different levels of mistake, right? A mistake can land you in prison and really ruin your life, or a mistake can be like losing a few $1,000s. So you want to make those small mistakes, not the big ones. And how do you avoid making the big ones? By learning from people who have made them before. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's definitely pretty much it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Daniel. It's been so much fun. The 1 hour has just gone by so quickly talking to you, but thanks for coming on the show, and I'm sure I'll have you again. But all the best, man.
Likewise. Thank you. I appreciate your time.